I'm Lori Ward again, CEO at Washington's National Park Fund, and you're about to meet this handsome young man here in a few minutes. We've been growing stronger every year, even during COVID years. People often ask, was it tough times while you were raising money? And we actually had our best years ever. We accredit that to the fact that so many people, they realize how important the parks are to them, especially during really challenging times, renewing their souls and getting up and out into the fresh air had a huge impact, and people showed it by giving to the parks through Washington's National Park Fund. I know a lot of you who are with us today are included in that pool, so thank you. Let's see, the superintendents every fall and winter provide us with their top priorities that would otherwise go unfunded. And they provide them to us from their leadership teams. So it's a collective of people investing input there, and they're given to us in priority order, which is really terrific. We work through the projects throughout the year and then distribute the funds at the end of the year. We call it our P3 booklet, Park Priority Projects booklet. And it's about to be posted on our website later this month. So be watching for that. And it outlines all the things that the parks have submitted to us. So together we're fighting and doing great things, I believe, for our national parks. Our vision is to see that these three national parks, Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic, are strong and vibrant, that they remain youthful and everlasting. Okay, so with that, I want to ask all of you who are with us, did you get your hiking boots on and you've got your pack packed and you're getting on the bus to go to a virtual field trip up at North Cascades? Here we go. How many of you with us today consider North Cascades as your primary playground? I'm sure you've seen in recent years how North Cascades is called out to be one of the least visited. Thank you, Catherine. One of the least visited in the country. Seems like the visitation was down this past year, but for various reasons. It seems like our best kept secret at North Cascades is starting to be featured in oh so many places. So yeah, it's known as the American Alps. A lot of friends, mountaineers over the years came up with that back when North Cascades was established. And today we welcome the new superintendent, Don Stryker, who's quickly become a friend to me. And I think you'll find that you'll feel the same way when you meet Don. Don's been at the park, like I said, since November, and he's got 28 years of experience under his belt with the National Park Service. Term of endearment that we've used this last 6 months is, what Alaska giveth, Alaska taketh away. Alaska took care, or Sarah Krieshbaum, and she's now serving in the position of regional director for the state of Alaska for the National Park Service. And Alaska gave us Don as well as Greg Dudgeon at Rainier. We're excited to be working with Don and Greg and also Lee. Don did serve as superintendent just prior to, like I said earlier, Denali National Park and Preserve in Alaska. Boy, that's on my bucket list, that's for sure. Don's skilled in managing vast natural areas, as you can imagine, and he's very good at cultivating partnerships on behalf of the park. He enjoys collaborating with partners like us and has already endeared himself to everyone who he's met. And we're very fortunate to have him sitting with us today during this interview. So with that, Don, you can come on and unmute, and here we go.
Great. Well, so we were on a field trip, so I had my hat, my vest on, but I'm actually inside and it's kind of hot. So if it's okay with you, I'll dispense with the hat and the vest, Lori.
That's got to go. Passport, backpack, get rid of it.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, we're excited to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey down from Alaska, when you got here? Are you getting settled? Share a little bit with us, would you?
Yeah, sure. I think since you've randomly put up that funny picture of me, people might be curious about what that has to do with anything. And other than you can tell that it was 1976, right? Which I think explains the disco shirt. I chose that picture and I wanted to share that picture because really for me, becoming a park ranger was a tale of two grandfathers, right? On the one hand, I had my grandpa Stryker, who was the creator and the author of the Lone Ranger book series, right? So there was always sort of this ranger mystique going on, and for me, a deep desire to sort of get into the Great West. The other grandfather, Opa Schneider, was an unbelievable outdoorsman and really into history. And so whenever he came to visit, he would always drag me around to places, right? My first real memory of Opa Schneider coming to visit was in 1976, actually. And I was living in a little town of Lansdale, just outside of Philadelphia. And the place he dragged me to was Valley Forge National Historic Park that day. And it always resonates because we were celebrating our independence. We went to Valley Forge, then we went into Philadelphia to Independence and to see the Liberty Bell. And just having that history and that connection to these special places was cemented in my mind early. So I wanted to share the picture just to sort of set the stage of where did my ranger roots get started. The drive down here, Lori, from Alaska was really eye-opening for me because I was dodging the first two of those the atmospheric rivers, right, coming through Canada and then coming into this part of the country where they were very much affecting us too. And my first impressions of the park were on the one hand, wow, I can't believe that this place is being as impacted by climate change as Denali was, right? So we have a road that's failing in Denali. And as I was driving into Marble Mount for my temporary housing, it was the same story there, right? We built a road in a place and the land's giving way, and this is not a sustainable model. And how are we going to deal with these climate related impacts in the future? That's a terrible challenge that we're going to face. And we can either resist or try to react, or we can get out in front of it. That was my first impression. And then you say least visited park, right? The North Cascades that I remember is from when I visited in 2000. And literally it was like, people know Mount Rainier, people know Olympic, and I got here and I was like, wow, nobody knows about this awesome place. And I drove the long way to Stehekin and spent some time there, and there really wasn't a lot of pressure. When I first got here, Lori, every weekend I went up into the park, and every weekend I was being tailgated and passed, and every weekend there were people just crammed in all of the pullouts, and I had to say to myself, I think we've been discovered. So I think those are the first couple of impressions that I had coming down from Alaska.
Hey, Don, hold on just a sec. All of our guests, somebody's typing in the background. If you wouldn't mind muting your microphone, that'd be helpful. Either that or hold off on the typing because it's going over Don's voice. So we'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to you ready to go to the next photo?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Casey, there we go. Share a little bit about what's going on in these photos, Don.
Well, so this is just sort of a cool tour of the Park Service, right? For me, from left to right. I had the privilege, and you talk about finding your awe, right? Something I think important for us in these COVID times, and to be resilient. It's important for all of us to try to get out and find awe. It's really easy for me to do it because it's just outside the back door. And sometimes finding my awe is in like places and settings like you see in the picture there, right? That was at New River Gorge, which is sort of the best of the West in the East. And it's funny because the local Chamber of Commerce wanted, they wanted to do some marketing involved with the National Park Service, right? You know how hard and how stern our logoing requirements are, but they were also specifically trying to engage sort of the aging community to say, this place that's known for its big whitewater and awesome rock climbing can also be a place for people who are sort of in their middle and and advancing years. And so they managed to convince old Graybeard there to get out as if I were about to rappel over the edge of the rock and pose for a photo. Really neat place to find my awe. The picture on the left that you see is me at Mount Rushmore. And, you know, Mount Rushmore is a very moving place. I think to people who are used to big, vast, natural, wild places, there's lots of times when you have that experience where literally people are reduced to tears. But I can't tell you how much I was surprised at Mount Rushmore by how many people, and typically veterans, but how many people actually said that that is their favorite National Park Service site, and were equally deeply moved to tears, literally just being sort of in the presence of that shrine of our democracy. That's a photo with me and Benazir Bhutto, who came to visit. And you know, talk about finding your awe. I mean, being able to walk around with her and to share a little bit about culture. She, you know, she was super inspiring. Certainly opened my eyes and corrected some false assumptions I had. But awesome experience. The picture on the right I shared just to show you that even the pencil pushers, accountants like myself, when you're engaged in the park, you have this opportunity to do a massive amount of other duties as assigned. And so I was very involved in structural fire and managed to get modestly involved in wildland firefighting too. And that's a picture of my first helicopter trip back when I was a youngster, some 25 years ago.
That's fun. That's really neat to hear you say about Mount Rushmore. That was a great story. I appreciate that. Let's go on to the next photo. There we go.
Okay, so I staged these up for no particular reason. You know, in terms of finding your awe, there's a combination of awe and awesome when you are out in the quiet in March. So I shared this because it's March, right? March is my favorite month in Alaska because March is the transition. You go from cold and dark and just sort of lonely at the start of March. And by the end of March, you have tons of daylight. You have the solar radiation just from the sun coming down, so you can be out at 5 degrees in shirt sleeves. But there's nothing like being out in that kind of setting with total silence, except a dog team mushing through with the sights that you see on either side of you. I mean, I wish that everybody could have the total immersion that you get into a landscape by being out there, non-motorized, and really sort of seeing it on its terms. So I shared that one to sort of continue on this theme of awe, right? The bighorn sheep, that's not a great picture of a bighorn sheep, but that's one of my favorite pictures of awe because people like to talk about the dumb things that people do when they visit parks, right? And this is a picture that I took right before I saw one of the epic, stupidest things ever at Yellowstone National Park, right? The bighorn sheep were coming down. There was a guy who was so moved by the bighorn sheep to take a picture of them that he actually laid down in the road on a blind curve and started taking pictures of the mountain in the middle of the road, right? So not necessarily the greatest picture of a bighorn sheep, but in terms of the emotions that these places inspire in us, I just that will always stand out in my mind as, you know, it may seem stupid, but it's stupid for a purpose. A love of these places and a deep and abiding connection.
Kind of lose our minds, don't we? And we're up there, we're just so moved by the beauty of these incredible places and these incredible creatures. Casey, you want to take us into one more?
Yeah, okay. So this is as I got here, you know, so I haven't had a chance to be in the high country yet. I'm not quite as hardy as I used to be backcountry skiing or snowshoeing up into the American Alps. But I did have a tour And they were gonna take me to the top of Ross Dam on that tracked vehicle. And I'm not a big fan of heights, I will tell you. When I was at New River Gorge, the folks there tried to get me over my fear of heights by having me rappel off the 876-foot high New River Gorge Bridge, and that didn't work. But here's a picture of me in this little tracked vehicle on the Ross Dam, just so that I can make the connection. By the way, we didn't make it up there because that thing went so slowly that you could have walked faster, and we just didn't have the time in the day. But great shout out to our partners at Seattle City Light for arranging that piece of the tour. And again, I think that this offers an interesting juxtaposition about all of the above nature of North Cascades National Park complex, right? So we're more than just a big natural wilderness area, right? We also have rec areas, which is great. Recreation, recreation, reconnecting with our special places. And again, the interface of sort of people in place, you know, the story at New Halem of that being a company town, and the story of these dams and how it's providing clean energy, right? 25% of Seattle's electricity, I think, comes from the dams here in the North Cascades. So I just think it's a super cool way to sort of tie together a bunch of different threads that are important to me, Lori. And I keep looking down and to my right because that's where you are, Lori. I'm actually looking you in
It's
the
all
eye.
good. We all get it. We all get it for sure. Don, you mentioned Stehekin, and you went to Stehekin years ago. You probably haven't been up, or maybe you have. I think maybe you have this winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, go.
Yeah, so I've been to Stehekin twice since I got here. I love Stehekin. Stehekin reminds me of kind of the interior of Denali, right? A small community trying to make a go of recreation in a place that's surrounded by sort of the 100-pound, the 800-pound gorilla, the federal government, us, right? An unbelievable resource, also facing some real challenges because I think it was 2003, we lost the road there, again, built by the river. But with that, we lost sort of, I won't even say the easy access. We lost access for any but the hardiest among us to sort of get into the Alpine there on the south side, right, of North Cascades. And so that's a real challenge that's facing us, is to figure out how we're going to try to ensure that access in the future, and really to figure out how to satisfy the increasing demands that we see sort of here on the west side, also on the east side, thinking big thoughts about what can winter visitation look like there. So again, super exciting community, much different to access in the winter than it was in the summer for my earlier trip. I need to factor in more time to get over those passes.
Don, do me a favor and put your hands in your lap, because when you hit the table, we hear the reverberation. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You think you won't hear my lap?
Yeah, no, we won't hear your lap. Don, Stehekin is so incredible. I, along with some board members years ago, hiked from Sahali Arm on down. It was like a 2-night experience, and it was so wonderful. And we rode on the buses, the red buses, and anybody who's been to Stehekin can tell you about the buses and the important role that they play. I'm kind of humbly proud that together, donors and we have supported the repairs of those. And they're getting old though, aren't they, Don?
Yeah, well, they're getting old and they're ripe with repairs. They're sort of not the standard school bus. And I have to say thank you, Lori, and thank you to everybody out there who's helped to fund that project, because it's the lifeblood of circulation for people out in Stehekin. I hear from staff all the time. Once again, that may not have seemed like the biggest dollar amount of money, but that was the enabler. That was the grease for the gears to sort of keep recreation and access, which in my mind, access for people to have that awe is the linchpin to creating stewards. right? And that's what all of our mission is, I think, is to create stewards. So yeah, thank you for mentioning the red buses.
Well, we're looking forward to focusing in on those buses in the upcoming years and hoping to raise enough so you can purchase some new ones, because we know, like you said, it's a lifeblood. We also understand and appreciate the fact that roads get washed out. It's like the West Side Road up at Mount Rainier, and we all want it open. We all want these roads open, but they just keep getting washed out, and it just doesn't make sense, does it, Don?
No, I mean, I think the model that we used in the past of putting roads right along rivers, as a concept, that's not sustainable. And so that's why I like to talk about the broader concept of access, right? Because maybe it doesn't look like it did in the past with the same roads. Maybe it's not roads for everybody who wants a private vehicle, right? Maybe it's more of a Denali model where we look at roads for clean, quiet buses or some other sort of people transport. Maybe it's moving to bikes. And allowing sort of e-bikes, right? So that it's a little bit easier for those of us that are getting a little grayer on the steep inclines. Yeah, I think access is terribly important, and yeah, tying that with climate change. Thanks.
People have asked me to ask you, speaking of climate change, have asked me to ask you about it and the impact that it's having up in North Cascades National Park. Have you had time to gather impressions or feedback from employees about the impact, and could you share some perspectives?
Yeah, I think it's going to be not surprising to anybody here. The impacts to climate are certainly profound. We're only beginning to understand all of them. The really obvious visible signs, like increased fire, increased flooding, right? Roads getting washed out, and glaciers disappearing, right? At sort of accelerating rates. Yeah, when you do that geometric progression, once you hit sort of that asymptote, it's going to be bad. So we have a lot of information about those, and that's enabling us to sort of figure out how to react. What we don't have as much information about yet is, so what's the vegetation going to do, and what's the prognosis for that in the future, right? How are we going to be able to defend on landscape levels? As waters warm, what does that mean for all the critters in the rivers and streams, right? So while we have done a pretty good job of certain sort of high level vital sign monitoring and inventorying, I think there's a lot left to be said for some of the other places that maybe we haven't looked as thoroughly. Bugs, to me, bugs always comes to mind, right? Because we are all guilty, I think, of really loving to highlight the charismatic megafauna, right? So for every big critter, we have an ologist, but I only know of 2 entomologists in the entire national park system, and one of them was the one that I hired in Denali. And when you think about sort of the impacts of bees and pollinators, right? I think that's another place that we're going to need to probe a little bit more deeply. So my quick reaction is it's impacting us here too. We are starting to get the science that we need in order to be proactive to figure out how we're going to adapt, because I believe that that's our best strategy, is to figure out what our adaptation strategy is, not put our heads in the sand, right? And not try to resist, but instead try to figure out how we can do things differently to cope with the fact that it's not an if, but a when.
Thank you. Don, I'm kind of going off the list of questions, but this one I think is.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that, Lori doing that. Don, housing across the country for National Park Service is, every time I go to a meeting, a national meeting, it always comes up. And at first I was like, that makes no sense. We should not be in there. But now it makes absolutely complete sense. Tell us about the impact that the lack of housing is having, as much as you know. I know you've been there just a few months, but what is the impact that a lack of housing in Marble Mount, say? What impact is that having on the staff and the people you're able to hire?
I'll give you a quick vignette. First, let me just say that housing is the existential crisis for the national park system. And I say that because it's there on a lot of levels, right? As you see the increase in sort of Airbnb, right? You recognize that the places where that's most attractive are the places where our national parks are, right? So it's no mystery that eventually, just as our local communities, residents are going to be priced out of being able to afford housing, so too are our temporary workers. In other words, Jackson Hole is coming to every place that's a national park. Faster maybe for some than others, and certainly accelerated in a place like the greater Seattle metro area, right? Just because there's so much other high tech. I mean, in the 20 years since I've been here, holy cow, I couldn't believe it when I got back here. Every little, what used to be sort of bedroom community is now commuting distance. It seems, from Seattle or from Everett or, you know, to the Amazons of the world. My little vignette story is that I saw Katie from our visitor services last Friday, and I said, "Hey, so how's it going today? It's Friday." And she said, "Man, it's a failure day." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "I've been on the phone all day making job offers for seasonal interpreters, and I've gotten zero." And I said, "Well, is this just part of, you know, the rest of the country catching up to us? Is this just sort of we're not sure we want to?" She said, "No, it's housing. If we don't have the housing, people can't afford to come here." And sadly, the other stories that I heard are how, and people didn't want to share this, right? But we opened up the concept of, so should we have some RV pads? Can we come up with some other way? Should we have sort of group camping where we could facilitate at least having running water, right? So we do things like that in Alaska where people are in dry cabins, and we recognize that. So we provide laundry and shower and whatever, and you know, charge appropriately for that utility. And you know, people were really sheepish. And honestly, they were like, wow, like, we didn't want to bring this up, but for the last 2 years, we've had a lot of people living in their cars, like literally, and they weren't sure where was legal in the park, where wasn't legal in the park. And so sort of all of that associated angst with, am I supposed to be here, or aren't I supposed to be here? If I could spend just another 45 seconds or so, Lori, part of the reason that this is so complicated is not just a matter, it's not just a matter of finding money and partners to build housing for us. It also gets into the rules and regulations associated with the rate structure, right? So even if we can afford to build housing now out of appropriated money, and with the infrastructure push, the Great American Outdoors, there's a lot more money. And I will say that Congress writ large, stakeholders writ large, now really understand the need for housing, right? It's in the mainstream conversation now. So it's no longer like, oh my gosh, shucks, should we be in this housing business? But when we have Park Service owned assets, we are obliged to follow OMB's requirements. And what OMB says we have to do to set rates for people is to do a tri-county, the 3 counties surrounding the area, appraisal basically. And we have to set our rates at the same as the market value will hold. So that's not going to be any help, right? And so that, when you combine it with the fact that I think we're moving more to a population of employees, whether they're seasonal or not, who are not comfortable being in bunk beds, 4 to a room with 3 rooms and 1 bathroom in a house anymore. I mean, this is just not putting people first in the way that we need to. So we need not only money and partnerships and leverage, but we need friend raising to figure out how to get this message out so that housing can be part of the compensation package, kind of like it is in the military, right? like it's a prerequisite to do your job that we recognize one way or another, we have to figure out how to get you appropriate housing. So big existential challenge. I very much appreciate you bringing that one up.
Well, I think that people, if they haven't heard about it, they will start to, and they need to understand what's behind it. I mean, and it's really having a huge impact. Thank you. Since you've been at North Cascades now, you've probably started to hear stories about the impact that our friends and donors are having on the park through WNPF. What, if you were to pick out a few stories that stand out in your mind, Don, what might they be? What impact are our friends having?
The funny thing is, red buses came up right away. Like the red buses, immediately the red buses came up when I was talking. And as a tangent to that, people were talking about a hybrid vehicle that you bought, and like how that's made campground maintenance so much better and so much easier. For me, the one that resonated the most is when people described to me, and I'm going to get this wrong, is it Sea to Summit or Summit to Sea? And basically it's working on food sustainability with our Indigenous partners. And there is nothing more powerful in my mind than facilitating us to be able to make those connections in a way that's meaningful to youth and to our neighbors. Like people were gushing about that, but I was like, tell me more. Like, this is unbelievable. This is amazing. I had several people mention to me, and I don't know what it is. I have visions of sort of Julia Andrews in The Sound of Music, running through the fields, but with butterfly nets. But whatever this butterfly project is, like, I don't know what the butterfly project is, but people rave about the butterfly project. And then I would say too that we had two people who took Carmen, who I have not met yet, and Mike, who I have met, who took the seed that you provided in a study of microplastics, right? And I believe it was microplastics in the mountain lakes was how that project started. I don't know if people recognize these folks were so, I don't know if moved is the right word, because microplastics have been on a lot of people's mind, but we've never been able to do anything about it. They took that seed project, and now the two of them are paying it way forward. One of them is looking at the impact of microplastics in the whole food chain here. And the other one is looking at microplastic accumulation in the snowpack, right? So this went from like, look at the water where it's easy to now look like seriously downstream at where we're going to have long-term impacts. So unbelievable leveraging opportunities. And I just have to say, we have amazing staff, super smart, super passionate, occasionally institutionally arrogant. That's how we build us. But we've also been demoralized. I mean, candidly, and this isn't just a 2-year phenomena with COVID. I just see that people are tired. They're tired of a decade of whenever the budget is in crisis being blamed. It's the federal employees. It's the, having our appropriations held up, right? Having us be held hostage, right? For sort of political, and when I see things like the Butterfly Project, and when I see people reacting to any of these, beyond money, what you and your organization does is you tell our folks you have value. We so appreciate what you're doing at a very detailed level, that we want to be brought into it, that we want to be part of it. And man, there's no award that I could give that can send that kind of positive vibe out to a workforce who I think is in need of a little bit of cheerleading, candidly. And thank you for that.
Thank everyone here. It's
Yes.
not, yeah, thank you. It's all about all of us coming together. A few comments to follow up. If you want to learn more about microplastics, Butterfly Project, go to our website, go up into the corner and search, and you'll find all kinds of information. And both of those stories, my goodness, they're fascinating. And yeah, who would think that blue tarps would impact from the wind, right? Who would think that blue tarps would impact our lakes? And the Butterfly Project is probably, I'm not sure how many years, but we've been funding that a long time. And I want to call out one other thing. There's these adorable little scooters, not scooters, but little vehicles that are electric. You mentioned it, but in the campgrounds in New Halem and Colonial. And it's what a great thing, because it's no longer, you know, pollution producing old pickup trucks, right?
Yeah.
And then also I'll say one more is the
Leading by example, right? Leading by example for people.
yeah, exactly. And the cool, and I know some of our friends who are on the phone or on the video with us today help fund this, the cool hybrid Subaru up at Stehekin. You probably saw that we were there. So it's just all these touch points that all of you who are with us today have on these parks. So I appreciate that. Let's see. So Don, in the future, in the next year or two, what kind of things are you hoping to see? And we just have a few more minutes and then I'm opening up to some questions. What do you want to see happen with projects at North Cascades? What comes to mind?
You know, I touched briefly on access. I think access in a lot of places is going to be important. And we're right now undertaking a study to figure out where we are with the accessibility writ large across the complex. And I am sure that that's going to result in deficiencies. And I'm sure that's going to result in deficiencies that we can't currently afford to pay for. But accessibility is, I think, a terribly important topic. And so it's sort of not even at the super expensive level of road building in Stehekin, right? It's as simple as campgrounds and very much front country things. That's one of the things that I'm looking at. You mentioned housing too. You know, I'm really motivated to continue to probe at the most important priority that I have any place I go, and that's connecting our neighbors' kids to their special place, right? There's nothing you can do better in my mind as an investment. And sometimes they even drag their parents along with them, right? And so we've got some great models with the stuff that we're doing with North Cascades Institute. There's some other things that we did in other places that I've been. In New River Gorge, we actually had a rangers and training program over the summer where we brought kids in, neighboring kids in over a 13-week period. And every week they did a different sort of activity to see the diversity of things that rangers do. And this is meant to be sort of a feeding ground for future rangers, right? Building future rangers. We also, in Denali, we did a thing called intensives, where the first full week of the local high school, they came into the park for an immersive experience, natural resources, cultural resources, right? And it was truly science. And then that kicks off one of the things that we've done in many places is sort of this notion of citizen science, but you have the local high school kids doing the citizen science, right, in the park. In a super structured way. So I think there's lots more attention there. I know you said we just have a few more minutes. I'm one of those long-winded guys that you could never get on NPR. The other thing is just when you think, and like I'm only beginning to think about it, but when you think about the potential that's out there to reshape what we're going to be for the next 50 years with the relicensing, right? Wow. And what I see is like, wow, how can we be sensitive about visitor use management, right? Sort of the buzzword for not making sure there's too many people, and definitely not in wilderness, right? But is there a demand for people to sort of do the Cascade Loop Road in a way that is orchestrated for them and makes sense, and you can make reservations, right? What about the notion of people who actually want to have the sort of the equivalent of a Grand Lodge concept, but in North Cascades? Does that opportunity exist for us? I think people would be really, really psyched to be able to do the old New Halem tours like they did back in the day, right? When they had the damn chicken dinner and if we could actually work to have those houses in that area for overnight accommodations for guests to come see, so then you're seeing the natural resources and you're also seeing sort of the cultural resources. And it is cool that we're a company town, and like, we don't need to shy away from that story. People love that story. So like, in terms of just the visitor service opportunities that I think we have coming down the pike, wow, the world is our oyster. We are at the best possible time, right? We're through the first couple of generations that maybe people were cranky and going to their separate corners, and we're not yet in Yellowstone mode where we sort of know what we are when we grow up. We're right in a place right now that we get to vision what is it that we want to be when we grow up, and that's a perfect time to be in a park.
Love all that, Don. And with the leadership at the Department of Interior and the National Park Service Director, Charles Sams and Deborah Holland, and embracing all of that in the neighborhood communities, neighboring communities. You've talked about that, so I appreciate that. Okay, we're running short on time, unfortunately. I'm going to get to a few quick questions. Let's see, you ready? You ready? Okay, Don, we work with your staff in stocking fish in some of the lakes up in the park. In the last few years, and some of these, you'll be like, I'll get back to you. But in the last few years, we seem to be stalled on getting fish put into the lakes. Can you address on how we can move that forward? Do you know, Don, or can we get back to this person?
I do not know if we are stalled. I hear that we're moving forward more aggressively this summer than we have been, particularly with bull trout. But I can get back to you. And actually, Lori, I hope you share my cell phone number with people. Text, call me anytime. Like, literally, my door is open for all of you. And I can, when I don't know the answer, like now, I can connect you with the people who do know the answer. That, by the way, is Ashley. And he'll be happy to talk to you about fish for hours and hours and hours.
Hey, Rich, will you send me an email? My email is Laurie, LAURIE @WNPF.org, and we'll take it from there. I appreciate that. How do you imagine the volunteer? Ooh, I like this one. How do you imagine the volunteer program in the park evolving under your leadership? Good question.
Well, so let me give you the flip side of that coin, Lori. Unfortunately, right now, we are razor thin. And I love volunteers, but I got to tell you, volunteers are not free. And the biggest barrier for volunteers is sort of having the sophisticated staff with institutional knowledge. And I say this because it really is a safety thing, right? When you think about what would traditionally be for an employee, onboarding and training, right? We work in really sort of dangerous places, doing relatively dangerous stuff, even when it's routine. And my staff is about half of what it was at Denali here. And we're starting to see that huge turnover, right? We have not built ourselves into being resilient. We hate change. We hate change, but now it's finally going to be forced upon us, right? So 3 out of 5 of my division chiefs are vacant right now. And so the first thing that I'm doing to equip us for volunteers is to make sure that I have a core team that's well established. The second thing is to make sure that it's not a function that's just stuck with only one division, right? And that's the thing that makes it terribly hard. Lots of times, you have a volunteer and they're a ranger, right? So you don't get the breadth of sort of facility projects that people might be interested in, doing trail work. Who knows what kind of citizen science you can have volunteers do, right? I could have volunteers doing accounting and grant writing, for lack of a better term, right? So I see a sophisticated sort of big picture model of volunteers, but unfortunately, I need to spend a year or two sort of retooling our key staff.
Well, we're going to keep coming back to you and doing this because, one, it's been one of our highest response virtual field trips that we've had. So people, They love your park, and it's our park. But they love what you're doing, Don, and how you're taking care of that incredible space up there. And
Hey,
So
so
I just
Lori,
wanna-
if I could interrupt you for just
Sure,
a half
sure,
a
sure.
second, because I sense that you're about to tune us out.
yeah,
So I will say one of the things that I'm offering is you want to see me to see like what's my facial hair status going to be, right? Because you notice that it's changing over time. So next time I'll have yet a different face to greet you with. But before you leave, what I was really hoping, Lori, is that you could find like a couple seconds to get a word in from my buddy to the south.
all right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's do that. You ready? Okay. Before you start it, Casey, thank you. Greg Dudgeon from Mount Rainier and Don Stryker have known each other for how many years, Don? And then would you tee this up for us, please?
Yeah, for 10 years we've worked together. I was in Denali, he was in Gates of the Arctic, north of me. Now he's in the southern, highly visited place, and I'm in the northern, lesser visited place. And we have a great relationship. We work together all the time, and so I appreciate you. It's Mount Rainier's birthday today, so.
Go ahead, Casey. Thank you.
It's a special day today. Mount Rainier National Park is 123 years old. As you can imagine, the generations of memories that have been made over the years, and the memories yet to be made. Happy birthday, Mount Rainier.
Casey. Don, thank you. Great. Thank you so much. And as we begin wrapping up, I want to mention to everyone who's with us, and you've all stuck with us, so time is you're okay. In a couple weeks, actually, next month, early next month, Bill Zimmer from North Cascades National Park, trail maintenance guy, is going to be leading the discussion. So if you have trail questions or curious about, don't take those trails for granted. The winters are so hard on them. And the work that they put into maintaining those trails year after year, we'll be exploring and hearing from someone who knows them pretty darn well up in the North Cascades. And with that, I just want to say, Don, it's such a pleasure. You have said, you feel like an old friend to me already, and it's only been a few months. So closing comments you want to say?
Old? What do you mean?
I didn't say that.
My closing comment is thanks for the energy. Literally, we couldn't do it without you and your organization, and your donors, and the friendship and the cheerleading is every bit as important as the money. And I just really appreciate it. And don't be strangers. Like anytime anybody is coming this way, I want to know about it, right? My house isn't ready to have you stay overnight yet, but within 3 months, if these floors stop kicking my butt, then I'll have guest rooms ready for you to stay in too.
Can't wait to see the change in the beard. Saul Weisberg from North Cascades Institute says hello. Thanks, everyone. Don, take good care. We'll be in touch. Casey, nice job. Thank you.